So as you know, we are close to reaching 30,000 subscribers, which is mind-blowing to me, and honestly, this wouldn't be possible without you guys. So to thank each and every one of you, I'm giving away 300, that's right, 300 pro-grade micro SD cards for your Nintendo Switch, so all of you can double the storage and re-download any titles you deleted because of Tears of the Kingdom. All you have to do is click on the link below, which will apply a $40 discount to any Vodafone SD card, add the 64GB or 32GB to the cart, and proceed to the checkout. That's it. The code will apply to any size, so you can even use it for a higher storage for a pretty hefty discount. We will also select 10 people who get the 128, 256, or 512GB card, or any other product from the site to get a free Nintendo Switch online subscription and a secret surprise. They have fantastic accessories like this Tears of the Kingdom case kit for people that couldn't get the special edition, and even 8-bit do to connect a PlayStation or Xbox controller to the Switch. They also sell multiple do-it-yourself repair kits like this one to replace any Joy-Con and stop the drift. So you find anything you like, use my discount code RESTART to get a 50% off on any order. Also, if we get 1,500 likes on this video, Vodafone will add another 200 coupons to the giveaway. Please keep in mind that we want the most people to get an SD card, so shipping is not included and all packages will be sent individually. Once again, thank you all for the support, and let's get straight into the video.
Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and this time we are attempting to explain Ganondorf's motive in Tears of the Kingdom. But in order to do so, it's going to require that we go into spoilers, so this is your warning. After I beat Tears of the Kingdom, my initial impression of Ganondorf was not negative, I was positive on it, but I wasn't necessarily thinking that Ganondorf was a very deep character. I didn't think he needed to be. I saw him as what he was, the Demon King, someone who wanted to bring on the night and perish the light. He was all about darkness and the underworld, and he was just straight bad and evil and powerful. And I was totally okay with accepting him as this, as just evil incarnate and being a tough opposing rival to be a nice final boss to an epic adventure. But upon closer inspection, I think there's a bit more to it than that. When we take a look at the final fight, that opening monologue with Ganondorf, it definitely helps to cement this idea of Ganondorf being all about the darkness. He doesn't seem to like the idea of the world of the light. It may explain why he keeps himself so deep underground. He's basically the devil. But when he transforms into his humanoid form or his Gerudo form, what he used to be before he took on the Secret Stone, he starts to talk about being the king and how he wants to rule all the land. He believes it is his destiny to do so. And I find this interesting because while he is the Demon King and he's all about the darkness, he also wants to rule. That is his goal, his ambition, to rule all of the land. Which is why I kind of found it to be a bit sad when he was being beaten by Link that he decides to give it all up. Everything about who he is, this proud, powerful character who had so much confidence and competitive spirit that held out through thousands and thousands of years, to just give it all up, lose himself, and to take the Secret Stone and swallow it so he can become the Demon Dragon as a last-ditch effort to destroy Link and plague the land of Hyrule in eternal darkness. It's almost like he gave up on himself. So is that it? Is that all there is to Ganondorf? I don't think so. But in order to better understand this iteration of Ganondorf, I think we need to first understand his place in history. So officially speaking, Skyward Sword is the very first game in the timeline. And at the end of Skyward Sword, we get an understanding of why there's always this big bad in the different Zelda games. It's Demise's curse of hatred. There will always be someone that will carry the same hatred as Demise, that will oppose a princess like Zelda and a hero like Link for eternity. But at least once Demise was defeated, this allowed Link and Zelda and the people of Skyloft to inhabit Hyrule and become Hylians which eventually leads to all other Zelda games. And while there may be some debate on the positioning of the memories in Tears of the Kingdom, my belief is the memories take place before the events of Ocarina of Time, so between Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time. In the memories, it's discussed how this is the era of the founding of Hyrule, so it's the beginning of when it's a kingdom. So in other words, at the end of Skyward Sword, the kingdom had yet to have been established. It was just becoming a community of people that lived in this land, and then in the memories of Tears of the Kingdom, that's when Hyrule is being founded. And what's important to understand here is that there was a war going on, and this war eventually evolved into being the Imprisoning War, but before that, this appears to have been a war of boundaries. We see the memory where the Gerudo are launching attack upon the Great Plateau, at the edge of the Gerudo Desert, and also the edge of Central Hyrule. Which interestingly, we learn from Breath of the Wild that the Great Plateau is the beginning of the Hyrule Kingdom. So Ganondorf is leading the Gerudo against the Kingdom of Hyrule for some time before he swore himself to fealty with the King of Hyrule, Rauru. But something that's important to note is that we actually see two characters from prior Zelda games, Kotake and Koeme. Forgive me, that's not how they should be pronounced. But these two characters we see in a couple of the different memories, and they are by Ganondorf's side. They share the same skin tone. Their masks that share a similar shape to their faces from Ocarina of Time also have the red and blue gems. And on top of that, they even have these pieces of cloth that have writing that when translated are Kotake and Koeme. And these two Gerudo women in Ocarina of Time are the surrogate mothers of Ganondorf. Now, the Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom is a different Ganondorf. And what's important to understand about the Gerudo is that every 100 years, there is a new male Gerudo to be their king. So presumably, this Kotake and Koeme are the same ones in Ocarina of Time, but the younger versions of them, and the Ganondorf of Tears of the Kingdom is the first Ganondorf that they supported and were led by. Which brings us to Ocarina of Time, which I feel is important to understanding the Ganondorf of Tears of the Kingdom. There is a new Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time, which before Tears of the Kingdom was the main Ganondorf. This Ganondorf had the surrogate mothers of Kotake and Koeme, who we see are ancient by this point. They were powerful witches that were able to live for hundreds of years thanks to their dark magic. And they trained and raised this version of Ganondorf we see in Ocarina of Time. And there is a scene in Ocarina of Time where we see Ganondorf kneel down to the king to swear his fealty in order to fool the king so he can navigate around in secrecy to set up his takeover, which is very familiar to how Ganondorf does it in Tears of the Kingdom as well. He swears his fealty to King Rauru in order to sneak around and find a way so he can take over. And what he does is steal the Secret Stone from Queen Sonia so he can obtain enough power to become the Demon King. Not too different from how Ganondorf waited around till he finally found access to the Sacred Realm to obtain the Triforce so he can eventually become the Demon King as well. So it seems pretty clear that there was an intentional comparison between these two different versions of Ganondorf, which is why I believe the dialogue from Ganondorf in The Wind Waker is very important. Now, what needs to be understood is that Ganondorf in The Wind Waker is the same Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time, just a lot older. He has survived for a lot longer thanks to his powerful magic and came back to take over Hyrule, which is eventually why the gods flooded Hyrule, and he survived and eventually meets up with Link in the events of The Wind Waker. And this version of Ganondorf is seemingly more calm and docile and calculated. There appears to be a bit more of a wisdom to him, and he almost appears to be not totally evil, because he doesn't have an initial intent to kill Link or Zelda simply to accomplish his ambition. Let me read you a bit of dialogue from Ganondorf in The Wind Waker. My country lay within a vast desert. When the sun rose into the sky, a burning wind punished my land, searing the world. And when the moon climbed into the dark of night, a frigid gale pierced our homes. No matter when it came, the wind carried the same thing, death. but the winds that blew across the green fields of Hyrule brought something other than suffering and ruin. I coveted that wind, I suppose. So with all the information I've presented, I believe we have our answer for what Ganondorf's true motives were in Tears of the Kingdom. Firstly, we have the curse of hatred from Demise. This curse of hatred is recurring, and it will take root in someone else every few generations when the time comes. And given that we've seen multiple different Ganondorfs throughout history become the Demon King, it makes sense to think that this curse of hatred from the initial Demon King Demise becomes part of who these characters are. So this very edgy desire to wreak havoc and bring upon darkness throughout all the land, that makes sense because of the curse of hatred from Demise. But I believe this darkness and hatred are compounded thanks to the challenging circumstances of the Gerudo people. As explained by Ganondorf in the Wind Waker, they coveted the land of Hyrule, the green fields, the tranquil environment. They had a war upon the border of the desert and Hyrule. There's a reason why the kingdom was established there at the Great Plateau. They wanted better lands, and Ganondorf, as the king, fought for himself and his people to have better lands. Which is actually a very sensible reason, but when you combine that with the hatred, it can become something far worse. Especially when you account for this great sense of pride that Ganondorf has. He is the sole male of all the Gerudo, and being the sole male, treated as the king, you're likely to think quite highly of yourself. This can lead to pride and arrogance. We saw Koami and Kotake by his side even in Tears of the Kingdom, and we know they go on to become the surrogate mother of the future Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time, who seemingly seemed to raise him in a similar way, someone who is prideful and desires power and to take over. So there is a pride and an arrogance. There is this dark, eternally bounding hatred from Demise that will eventually lead you down the path to becoming the Demon King. And on top of that, there is legitimate reason to fight for better land because of how dangerous the desert was. All this together is what drove Ganondorf in Tears of the Kingdom. And after struggling for thousands upon thousands of years in different ways possible, his hatred taking on different forms, physical forms, perhaps at the end, when Link is beating Ganondorf, ultimately all he wants to do is drive out that wretched light that created the desert, the suns that dried up the land and left the Gerudo region as it has been. So he gave up on himself and just relied on his hatred of Link, Hyrule, and the terrible conditions of the Gerudo region to plunge all of it into eternal darkness to become the Demon Dragon, which is the final fight in Tears of the Kingdom. And what's fascinating about this to me is that when you break it down like this, it's almost not even Ganondorf's fault, you could argue. He was always going to have that hatred of Demise. He was likely always going to be conditioned to have a great pride and arrogance due to being the sole male of his people, and with also Kotake and Koami witches by his side, it didn't bode well. And then with the terrible conditions of the Gerudo region and there being a legitimate need to find better lands, Ganondorf inevitably would always go down this path. But what do you guys think? Do you share my perspective, or do you see it a bit differently? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andre's Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.